Alright, so I was browsing Twitter and I saw a post a couple weeks ago that said something along the lines of, "Oh my god, look at this D&D player in my party. He wrote a long backstory in comparison to my other players. Guess who's getting killed in 2 sessions?" Now, this guy got ratioed pretty hard on Twitter and roasted even harder on r/RPG Horror Stories a couple days later, and now I'm here to talk about it, weeks after it's all died down, because that's what I do, I guess. But yeah, this is definitely an interesting post, and it's something that a lot of people talk about. Are long backstories good, or short backstories good? What's the ideal length for a character backstory in Dungeons and Dragons? And I have said in the past that I prefer shorter backstories. I tell my players to keep it under a page if they write a backstory, and yeah, that would make you assume, oh, are you going to agree with this guy? And my answer to that is no. He's wrong, but for a reason that you may find surprising. I know, keeping you on the edge of your seat with my tension and clickbait. Oh, how mysterious of me, right? Well, don't worry, we're going to answer all of your questions here on Tabletop Tavern Tips. Without further ado, let's get started. Alright, so backstories are the main component here, and I want to talk about that first, because I haven't actually expanded on my reasoning behind why I like short backstories as opposed to longer backstories, and keep in mind, this is all subjective. If you're a DM or you are a DM who likes longer backstories from your players, that is awesome. We are just playing the game differently, and that is perfectly okay. This is like one of the more subjective things in Dungeons and Dragons, just like a lot of things in D&D are completely subjective. So yeah, why do I prefer shorter backstories for my players? Well, the main reason is simply logistical. I have a limited amount of time on my hands, especially in that first session. When I'm prepping my first D&D session of a campaign, I want to knock it out of the park. I want it to be one of the best. Why? Well, it's your first impression. I want to leave a good first impression on my players. I want to get them hyped for the campaign to follow. I mean, seriously, this thing may go on for years. I want the first step to be a good one. And that means I put in a lot of work into that preparation. And that also means that when a player lays down a 15-page backstory at my feet, it's going to give me a little bit of stress, right? I am prepping a lot here, and I want to include character backstories. There's nothing that makes me happier than seeing a player's face when he or she realizes that their backstory is being included in the game. It makes me so happy because I love rewarding players for giving me a little bit of backstory so I can put it into the game. I love that. But if the backstory is super long, it makes it super difficult for me as the dungeon master to do that in the first place. Just because reading that kind of text block is, it's a bit difficult, especially when all players do it at the same time. If everyone sends me a backstory 10 plus pages, I mean, that is a hefty load of work. Now, I do think the idea that I don't like long backstories is actually a tad misleading, and the reason is because it's not that I don't like long backstories, it's that I don't like long write-ups. Ford's backstory in Critical Role has an entire graphic novel about it. You can write an entire book about Ford's backstory, literally, it's been done. But you could also write Ford's backstory in 2 paragraphs if you wanted to. That is why I like shorter backstory write-ups. It's just easier for me to read. Now, could backstories just be extended to fill more space? Yes, absolutely, and I think that's great. If a player wants to do a little bit of creative writing and write a longer piece for their character, I think that's awesome. It shows investment. It shows that they care. But for me as a dungeon master, when I'm trying to prep a session with sometimes a bit of a time crunch, I would like a shorter write-up so that I can get those details into my campaign so that you can experience your backstory in the actual game. Now, keep in mind, this hasn't happened before, so I've never actually had to do this, but it's my plan if it ever comes up. If a player tells me, hey Crispy, look, I just can't get this thing in under a page, I can't do it, I want to include more details, what do you want me to do? I will simply say, hey, give me a call when I'm doing X thing, I'll have some time on my hands, just give me a call, tell me the details, and I'll record it. I don't know about you guys, but sifting through a recording, like a 30-minute recording or a 15-minute recording even, is way easier for me than reading through a 10-page block, or even a 3-page block, or reading at all, really. I like listening to information. It's much easier for me to take in as a dungeon master. So that's often my alternative, or well, it would be my alternative if somebody wanted to include a more detailed write-up but didn't want to put more stress on me. I would just tell them, hey, give me a call and tell me the details. I'll record it, and if I want to use them, I'll run the recording back, listen for them, and then include it into the game. It's much easier for me. That's my solution. Now, there you go, in a nutshell, why I prefer shorter backstories. Again, this is just my DMing style. I'm sure there are plenty of DMs out there that would love longer write-ups for their players. I'm just not one of them. So, I basically just agreed with this guy, right? I agreed that shorter backstories are better and that longer backstories are less good. What the heck? Why am I disagreeing with him then? Well, because of something else that he said in that tweet. He basically said, a player did something I don't like. I'm gonna kill them now. That's dumb. I don't know how else to say it. That is really, really stupid and a terrible way to solve any problem in Dungeons and Dragons. I say this all the time in RPG horror stories. If you've been on this channel for a while, you've heard it a million times. In-game solutions never, ever, ever solve out-of-game problems. It simply does not work. I talked about this in a podcast with Critcrap, and he summed it up very, very nicely. Usually, when you put an obstacle in front of someone, they will see it as a challenge. And if they don't see it as a challenge that they need to overcome, they'll just see it as a punishment that they can't do anything about. It will result in bad vibes for your game either way. Either it's an obstacle and the player is just going to double down on behavior you don't like, or they're just going to feel bad about it and not have the same enthusiasm for your game. And D&D is a game that requires enthusiasm. It requires engagement. If one player is not into it, it can bring the whole mood down. So basically, killing someone because of a long backstory is a really bad idea. Now, to a degree, I stress, understand where this guy is coming from. If I did my usual and told a player, hey, 1-page backstory, maximum, and they sent me a 10-page backstory instead, I would be kind of annoyed. But I wouldn't respond to that by going, I'm gonna kill your character now in secret. I would instead just text the player and go, hey, this backstory is a little long, can you shorten it please? That's it. Like, that's as simple as that. You just need to talk to your players. You just need to tell them what you think is wrong. And if it's a minor thing like backstory length, then yeah, it's not a problem. You can just tell them, and I'm sure that the vast majority of players would be happy to edit it down. On top of that, killing players because of essentially enthusiasm for the game is really stupid. Now, of course, I'm not clairvoyant. I have no idea why this player wrote a long backstory, but a lot of the time when a player dedicates that much effort to a game and their character, that means they care. Now, of course, we've seen RPG horror stories where that care can go in the wrong direction, main character syndrome, where a player cares about their character way too much and doesn't care about the rest of the party. Sure, that could happen, but that's not like guaranteed by any means. If a player writes a lot for their character, maybe they just like their character. They just like writing, they enjoy the world of your game, what have you. There are tons of explanations for why someone would want to write a lot for your game. If anything, it just shows enthusiasm, and immediately showing hostility in response is a terrible, terrible idea, and you shouldn't do that. Killing somebody because they're enthusiastic will cause them to be less enthusiastic, and I don't understand why somebody wouldn't want enthusiasm in their game. I love it when my players care, and I want to facilitate that, not punish them for it. Okay, in summary, I totally understand it. I get why somebody doesn't want a long backstory in their game. Logistically, it's just hard to parse through. But I don't respond to a long backstory by killing a character. I respond by simply talking to the player. A simple text asking for a summary is not going to hurt anybody, and if anything, it will result in a better game for everyone at your table. On top of that, if you simply like long backstories, that is great as well. Do whatever you want to make the game good for your group and tell the story that you guys are going to enjoy. If you guys enjoyed this episode of Tabletop Tavern Tips, then please do leave a like. If you want to see more of our content, then you can check out our One Crispy Review playlist in the cards, where we review a variety of Dungeons and Dragons products. And while you're there, subscribe to Crispy's Tavern to get more of our content. And finally, if you want to leave your own tips or thoughts, go down to the comments down below. If you cannot think of a comment, leave the comment long backstory to let me know you made it to the end of the video. And that's like, comment, subscribe. I will see you all next time. Farewell.